Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Welcome to Dev with Excel. Alright, so in this video we shall be solving exercise 3.11, and previously we saw how we could deploy the backend to the internet. That's exercise 3.10, right? Okay, so in this video, which we are going to be solving exercise 3.11, we want to see how we can integrate both the front end and the back end on deployment, right? Okay, now what we need to do is we need to run a command that is going to create a folder for us. That folder is going to be more like a minified folder of the entire front end, and then we copy and paste that folder to our back end, right? Okay, going back to exercise 3.9, we can see that we are working with a particular front end folder, right? And it says do not implement the functionality for making changes to the phone number yet. That will be implemented in exercise 3.17. So I believe this rings a bell, right? So we are going to be using the folder that comes before the part where we solved functionality for updating phone numbers, and we got that folder in part 2, right? So going back to part 2, exercise 2.14, looking at exercise 2.15, here we implemented the code for updating phone number, right? So that means we are going to be using this folder in this exercise. That's the step 9 of the phone book. That's exercise 2.14. So this can be found in the part 2 of this material, right? Okay, so let's head into the code implementation. All right, so going to my VS Code, this is the current state of the folder we have. Let's be very sure it still works well. So let's do npm run dev. Okay, so this is running on port 3001 using the Thunder client. Let's see if we can perform a get request. Okay, get request works, and I believe the rest also should work. All right, so let's try to locate our setup folder for exercise 2.14. So going to our original folder, that's the folder we've been using from the start of this whole exercise. We can see we are from part 1 to part 3. So let's locate okay, sorry, not part 2, not part 3 rather, but part 2. Okay, so let's locate step 9 of the part 2, right? So this is the step 9 of the part 2, and that is the code implementation. That contains the code implementation for this exercise 2.14. All right, so let's run this. Let's copy let's first of all let's copy its part and see if it's going to work. So we are going to copy its part, right? So we cd into its part. So here, after we've confirmed that it's working, we need to carry out some processes, right? Make some necessary changes in the back end or in the front end, and then we create a dist folder. All right, so here we simply just do cd and then the parts. So let's do npm run dev. All right, so that's already loading. So coming to this part, let's okay, so um this is actually the local file we have, right? So testing out this entire endpoint on the browser, we have this data, right? Because we are currently running this server here for the back end, right? So we tested it here also on the Thunder client and it works fine. All right, so let's check our front end file and see if it's working fine. Okay, so as we can see, this is the front end that we just ran. That's the exercise 2.14, which is represented here as step 9. Okay, so we can see it's still working. Let's see if we can filter. Let's filter down. You can see this works fine. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is Going back to the instruction, right? So in the instruction, it says we should deploy the backend to the internet, right? Now, going to some aspects in this particular page, we can see how to do that, right? Now, there are some steps we need to follow, things we need to note. To get this done successfully, the first thing we need to do, we need to run an npm run build, right? So this is going to come after when we've done everything. And then we need to understand that we need to use the express static, right? This express.static as a middleware, which is explained somewhere here. Yes. So this is going to help us to be able to view or to connect with all the folders that we'll be getting from the front end, because this code will be passed into the back end, right? And then also in the front end, we are going to be changing the base URL. All right, so here, let's go to the front end, and then inside the SLC, we are going to be editing, service. All right, so here we are going to be editing this base URL, right? So that we can deploy successfully. All right, but after doing this, the entire code might affect our code when we run locally, right? But the idea is, let's get this deployed first and then make sure it's working on production. Then after that, we come to the code itself to fix it when run locally. All right, so the first thing we want to do is we want to use a static, right, the express static, and then that's going to help us to work with the folder we'll be getting from the front end. Now, we are not going to be copying this front end codes into the back end, no, right? So that's why we are going to be using an npm run build, right? So we are going to see how that is going to happen real soon. Okay, all right. So here is the back end, I believe. So here, what we can do here is, because we are expecting to paste a folder here from the front end, and it's going to be called dist, right? So we can just come here and say app.use. Okay, going to the material, let's see how it's used in the material so we don't make too much mistakes, right? So here we could just copy this entire part and then we paste it here. So this is a middleware, right, that we are going to be using. This helps us to connect to the folder that we are going to be working with real soon. Okay, so we save this, right? So this is okay. Now let's go to the browser and let's reload our backend. Nothing happens yet, right? But by the time we connect it with the front end, you see that we are not going to be having this, but rather we are going to be having a more better user interface from the front end. Let's also see if this can work itself. So we can see that here we have cannot get. Okay. So the next thing we want to do is we want to go to the front end code, which is gotten from the exercise 2.14, right? So what we can do here is, instead of having this HTTP localhost with the port, we are simply going to be removing everything here, right? Because the folder we'll be getting from this front end will be using the same port number as the back end. So in order to avoid issues, we no longer have to place this here anymore. So here is what I can just do. I can just duplicate this so we don't have to lose that. And then I do something like this. I remove this entire part. So let's be sure. Let's go to the material and see how it is done. Okay, so here we can see that what was left here was /API/notes, right? So that's exactly what we are doing too. So we just come here and say /API/persons, then we save. Okay, so let's now go back to the browser and see if the front end works fine. So as we can see, the front end is not working fine, right? That's because of these endpoints that we just edited. Now we are going to fix that after we successfully deploy this application, right? Now this is going to affect just the front end, it's going to affect when we run the code locally, right? but not on deployment. Reason being that this code, we are going to be having a minified version of it and then connected through the backend. So it's going to be sharing the port number of the backend as well. So the next thing you want to do is you want to create a dist file, right, from this front end. So how can we do that? Let's close this. And then what we can do is we simply just say npm run build. Okay, so let's go to the material and see what it does. So here we can see that we have npm run build, right? So this is going to create more like a minified version of the application, and we can see it's written here, right? And it's going to look like this when you load the file. So that's exactly what we want to do now. So we just run this. So this is going to create a dist folder in this step 9 folder. So just watch this part. It's going to be added soon. All right, so here we can see we have the dist folder here, right? So what we can do is we copy this file by just doing Control C. So there are other ways you can copy it, right? Based on the OS you are using. So there's a suggestion for us here. Those using Mac or Linux, you could just use this command or use this, right? But I don't need to do all of these things. I just have to do a simple copy and paste, which is also written here, right? Okay, so let's paste this to the back end, to the root of the back end. So I'll simply just come here and then paste it. So this is pasted now, and is going to be properly used because of this middleware, right? So now let's go back to the browser. Here we have the port 3001. Let's refresh this. So now you can see that we are running the back end, right? But now we are able to what, view the front end through the back end. So this is just the idea of it, right? This is just the idea of it, because now both the this represent the front end now. Both the front end and the entire back end now are on the same port, right? They are sharing this port 3001, right? So everything works fine. So now what we can do next is let's go back to the material to see. So what we can do here is kind of easy now, right? So we just commit the code we have right now. We commit it to GitHub and then we redeploy, right? So let's go back to the browser and see if this works fine. Don't forget, this is the back end now, not the front end, right? So let's see if we can filter Mary, Mary, yes. Let's see if we can add a new name. Let's say hello with a number. Let's say 9876. Okay, let's refresh this. All right, so we can see that hello 9876 got added to the entire code base, right? So this works fine. This works fine. There's no issue. Okay, so now since this works fine, we can now deploy this. We redeploy it back to the internet, right? So what we can do is I'll simply just go into my git bash, right? And then let's check for the status first. So I'm simply going to do git status. So we can see that we modified the index.js. So now let's add the new updates we have. So we've added that, then let's commit. So what can we put here? Let's say redeploy backend with dist folder, right? I think that's fine. Then the next one to do is we want to push. Okay, so that is done. So let's merge. Like I said earlier, you don't have to use that way to push your files, right? So that's just my own personal way of pushing my files when trying to commit. Okay, so let's just hold on for it. This is a bit slow. Let's just give it some time, right? It shouldn't take this long. I don't know why it's this long actually. Okay, all right. So we have that. So I'll simply just create pull request. I think my network is really, really bad. Let me see if I can switch my network. Okay, so why this is working this way, why this is trying to create a pull request. Let's see if we see have other things that can be going on. Okay, all right. Um, let's just refresh this. Okay, so let's try to merge. Let's confirm our merge. Then I can safely delete this repo. I mean safely delete that branch. I mean we don't want to delete this repo actually. All right, so we can see that we still have this from the previous exercise, right? And then what we can do next is we come to render websites, right? Here, let's try to load this again. So when we load this, when it's successful, we are still going to be having cannot get here, right? And all of that. But after when we use the render to redeploy, let's redeploy on render to see exactly what happens. So to redeploy, we could just come here and then click on manual deploy. Then we click on deploy latest commit. Excuse me. Excuse me. So we click on deploy latest commit, and this is going to redeploy the entire code again. So let's just give it some time. So here we can see we had cannot get, right? So let's see what we are going to get after the redeployment. Okay, so after this works successfully, we are going to be going to the code locally, right, to see what can be done to successfully do npm run dev on the front end. Okay, so this is deploying. Let's just get okay. All right, so now it's live, right? So now let's refresh this page. That's a deployed application and see what comes up, right? Hope this works well. Um, okay, so let's try and see if we can do something like this. Okay, so we are getting this, but the idea is we are supposed to also get the front end, right? We are supposed to get the front end actually. So let's go back to the code. Let's see what's happened. Okay, so here we can see that we don't even have that dist folder here, right? And I think something happened. Let's go back to our code and fix anything that happened. Let's go to our git ignore file, and then perhaps it looks like we ignored the dist folder, so it didn't get, see, we ignored it. So let us comment this out and let's save, right, so that this dist folder is not ignored. All right, so we have to redeploy again. Let's redeploy. Let's add. Let's do this. Then we do this. So hopefully this gets pushed to the GitHub now. All right, so let's see if we can merge it. And then once we get to the dist folder here, that means everything works fine. Okay. All right. Awesome. All right, so let's go into the repo and see if we have the dist folder. All right, here, so we have the dist folder, right? So now let's redeploy. So we come here and say manual deploy, deploy latest commit. Now this is going to be number 4. Yes, number 4. So let's just wait for it while this deploys. All right, all right, all right, all right. It takes some time actually. Okay, so it's uploading build. It has transferred 47 megabytes in 7 seconds. Extraction took 2 seconds. Okay, I think we are almost there. Build successful. No issues. All right, so the site or the application is live once again. So now let's refresh this and see. All right, so we can see here that we have exactly what we had in the front end here as well. Let's try to filter down. Also, let's see if we can add a name. Let me add dev with Excel, and then let's say we have my number to be 01234, and then click on add. Okay, let's refresh. So there's a reason why this is duplicating itself here, right? But when we refresh, we see that everything gets balanced, right? So we can see that we have dev with Excel. So that might be just a little bug we might need to fix in the future. All right, so this shows that this works very well, right? So we can see that we've successfully deployed both the front end and the back end successfully, right? By creating a production build of the front end. So that's the idea. Now, the next thing we want to now see is that when we go to the front end and we try to run this front end locally. Okay, let me just close this. Let's try to run this front end locally. Okay, so it's running now. Let's see if we can. Let's come to Vite here. Not this, not this. All right, this, yes. So we can see that this is giving us some issues, right? And that's because of this aspect. This part here, right? So because we remove this entire URL, now it doesn't know the ports which it should work with, right? So if we go to the material under proxy, it talks about something similar to that. It says changes on the front end have caused it to no longer work in deployment mode when started with command npm run dev, as the connection to the backend does not work, right? So how can we fix this? We simply just copy this code and then paste it in the config folder file, that's vite.config.js. All right, so let's copy this code here, and then we paste it immediately after the comma, in the React. So going to our code, where do we have that? That should be under app.js. No, sorry. That's under vite.config, right? So immediately after this part, we paste it, then we save, right? So now let's see if that is going to work now, because here we can see that we have a target URL, which is 3001. Okay, so going back to the Vite we have here, awesome. So here we can see that this is now working fine as expected, right? So I think we've been able to successfully solve exercise 3.11 to work both on production and development, right? So guys, here is the solution to exercise 3.11. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please do like this video and subscribe to my channel, right? See you in the next video. Bye.